Hello and welcome to the second video in the HASTE Simulation Faculty Induction Programme, and this is the one looking at educational theory behind simulation. Again, my name's Amanda Barclay and I'm the lead for HASTE. So our learning objective for this session is to understand and describe the educational theories underpinning simulation to help you plan and deliver your training in as effective a way as possible for your learners. To get there, we're going to look at the context of simulation, what we're trying to achieve, what do learners need and how do they learn, and how does this all relate to simulation. There will be points for thinking and reflection scattered through this presentation. So at those points, you might want to pause the video just to collect your thoughts, and you might also want to have a paper and pen available to jot down some of these. So what is simulation? Well, this chap listed at the bottom came up with a definition, and I've highlighted the words that I think are particularly pertinent. So simulation is a person, device or set of conditions which attempts to present education and evaluation of problems authentically. And the student or trainee is required to respond to the problems as they would under natural circumstances, and they receive performance feedback as if they were in a real situation. Simulation is any of these things. It could be using a mannequin, either one of our all singing, all dancing hi-fi mannequins, or one of our lower tech ones. It could be a part task trainer, for example, a catheterization model or an arm used to train for venipuncture. It could be an actor or a staff member displaying their very best acting skills. It could be based within the simulation suite or an additional teaching room, or it could be based in a clinical area, which is what we mean when we refer to in situ simulation. It's really about choosing the most appropriate means to achieve your learning objectives. And that isn't always the most technologically whiz-bang piece of kit. For example, if you want to practice breaking bad news, it would be much more effective in most circumstances to have a real life human to play the part of the patient rather than even my mannequin that can talk back to you. So here is the first of our thinking time moments. You might want to pause the video and consider what is learning and how do we know that learning has occurred. So this is the ultimate goal, and Kirkpatrick developed this pyramid really to describe evaluation, but it elegantly shows the intended progression from the initial reaction to a learning experience to outcomes on real patients, which of course is the ultimate aim for our organisation. And expanding that a little bit more, Miller developed this pyramid, which shows that we are trying to integrate knowledge, skills and attitudes to move beyond thinking about something to actually doing it and converting it into daily practice. And for example, I don't want my clinical team to tell me how to manage an arrhythmia at 3 a.m. I want them to actually do it. Now, knowledge is what everybody thinks they need, but it's the attitudes or awareness of human factors that are more important to enable novice learners to become experts. For example, you can teach anaphylaxis and you can know how to manage it, but if you can't coordinate the team around you or recognise the gravity of the situation, the outcomes won't be optimised. So there are many educational theories. This one is called Constructivism, and it's the one that most closely aligns with simulation. So to describe this, people make sense of external stimuli via cognitive frames, which filter, create and apply meaning to their environment. Now, frames consist of knowledge, assumptions and feelings in social activities, and these frames drive your thoughts and actions. You learn by actively constructing your own understanding through experience and reflection, not by passively acquiring knowledge. And if a facilitator can uncover learners' frames, they can help reframe the knowledge, assumptions, and feelings on which they're based to rebuild more effective frames and achieve better results the next time that frame is used. So, in diagrammatic sense, using Tetris as an example, you would aim to go from a frame on the left of your screen to the one on the right of your screen, which you can see is much more robust and has fewer gaps. And to get there, using simulation, learning, previous experiences and reflections to make those connections much more sound rather than wholly and disjointed. Here is another thinking time section. You may want to pause the video and consider, what do you need to be ready to learn, and how do you learn best? So how can we help people to learn? We can attend to their needs. We could use multimodality tools that reflect different learning styles. And we can recognise the learner's stage. Are they a child learner, adult, or in between? We can explore their previous assumptions and experiences to facilitate more robust connections, as we've seen in the previous diagram, and we should encourage reflection. So, looking first at learners' needs, Maslow made another pyramid which shows that physiological needs are really the bedrock of the learner's needs, and in order to get to the apex of the triangle, then you need to attend to these. And the physiological needs are legion, for example, warmth and refreshment. So making sure that people are comfortable before moving up the pyramid. And belonging and acceptance would be those within social groups, and self-esteem and respect from others. And then the apex of the pyramid, the self-actualization, is the realization of the learner's full potential. Again, you might want to pause the video at this conjecture to think about, do you learn in the same way as other people? And does your learning style change depending on what you're learning? So people don't all learn in the same way, and lots of educationalists have codified this, and we'll just look at a few of them. Fleming came up with this very nice, straightforward one, where there are 3 types of learning styles. People who prefer a visual learning style or from visual stimuli, for example, a presentation. Some prefer auditory stimuli, for example, a podcast, and some prefer a kinesthetic way of learning. So that's really sort of getting stuck in and trying it out. And an example of that might be a clinical skill. Depending on what you're learning, your preferred learning style might change. So, for example, if you are learning how to put in a central line, then you may want to actually feel the equipment and prefer to learn in a kinesthetic way. Whereas if you were learning more of a theoretical skill or piece of knowledge, then an overlap between visual and auditory might be preferable. Simulation caters to all 3 of these learning styles. Now, Honey and Mumford looked at learning styles in a slightly different way, and they came up with 4 different types. So in the red, you have the activist, and really that would be described as, can I do this now? Theorist in the green, which is thinking about why something works in the way that it does. Pragmatist in the purple, thinking about how what you're experiencing works in the real world. And reflector in blue, which is, can I have a think about that and try and work it out in my own brain? So again, you might want to pause and think about what makes you want to learn, and has your learning style changed over time? So Knowles came up with an adult learning theory, and he described the characteristics of adult learners as below. So adult learners are self-directed, generally motivated by internal incentives, as in a desire for learning that particular thing. They prefer problem-centered learning experiences. They have experience that they bring to their learning from before. They want to know the relevance of a topic, and they want to be moved by an experience to really embed that in their brain, and they are reflective practitioners. But what about students? So students are in between adult and child learners, and child learners don't have the same motivations. Therefore, that's where there may be a disconnect between what you expect from a student if you are expecting all of the characteristics of an adult learner that Knowles described above. So our current generation of students prefer technological ways of learning. They prefer focused teaching, and they need the relevance and learning opportunities explicitly signposting. For example, on a ward round, explicitly mentioning that you are going to teach them about hyponatremia based on the patient in front of you. They often learn for an exam rather than real life, but those of us who teach different grades of students will notice how their learning changes as a group when the FY1 posts get closer. So they then start learning about wanting to know about what is going to affect them when they become FY1s. So, working and learning. So traditionally, knowledge was delivered in terms of a lecture format, which is great for transferring high volumes of theoretical learning. Here, the teacher is the expert, and the agenda is basically what the teacher says it's going to be. There's minimal interaction, usually demanded from the audience, and it is a one-off discrete event. In a simulation format, this is good for rehearsing real life and complex scenarios. We don't have a teacher, we have a facilitator, because there are no rights and wrongs. It's practicing skills, it's led by the learners, and it's an interactive multisensory experience that has ongoing learning effects that should be encouraged through reflection. And this is really based on a recognition that we don't work in a classroom. We're all adult learners, and we work in multidisciplinary teams. We spend our days communicating, and we recognise the role of human factors in clinical practice. So shouldn't we learn in the same way that we work? And Kolb's learning cycle just reinforces how we learn, from having an experience to reviewing or reflecting upon it, to concluding and learning from it, and finally planning and trying out what you've learned from that experience. And so it goes round again. And how does this all relate to simulation? Well, just to pull it all together, setting the environment is based on Maslow's pyramid, looking at the physiological needs. And again, the pre-brief borrows from this as well in talking about safety and belonging. The actual session itself is based on Knowles' theory of adult learners, in that we present the relevance. The scenario is problem-centered, and there's psychological investment in it because it is a real-life scenario. Looking at the learning styles, it attends to the all of Fleming's suggestions of visual, auditory and kinesthetic, and also Honey and Mumford's activist and pragmatist categories, but also overlaps with the reflector and theorist ones as well. And looking at Kolb's cycle, it looks at the experience, the reflective observation and the active experimentation, depending on how far through that experience you are. Looking at the debrief, This is based on Knoll's description of adult learners being reflective practitioners, and the constructivist theory, but this will also depend on the technique that the person doing the debrief employs. Looking at Kolb, this is the abstract conceptualization stage of his cycle. And with Maslow, you're really trying to achieve the top bits of the pyramid, that is self-esteem and self-actualization. So that's a whistle-stop tour of educational theory pertaining to simulation. And I've really tried to keep it very focused to things that are going to help you. Some of the theories are quite complex, and I hope that I've helped break those down into simple parts. So the learning objective that we have covered is to understand and describe the educational theories underpinning simulation. We've looked at the context of simulation, what we're trying to achieve, how do learners need, and what do learners need and how do they learn, and how does this relate to simulation. And your next steps are to move on to the video about actually running a simulation scenario.